Hey folks, Andy Patton here, joined today by KREM's Brenna Greene. Brenna and I are going to talk Gonzaga basketball as both the men and women prepare for the WCC Tournament this week, all right here on the Locked On Zags podcast. Don't go away.
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What is going on, y'all? Welcome to the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Andy Patton, here to take you through another season of Gonzaga hoops. Today's episode of Locked On Zags is brought to you by Run Your Pool. March Madness is here, and Run Your Pool has a better way to create your bracket. RunYourPool.com is the premier sports pool hosting service. All right, I am thrilled today to be joined by Brenna. Brenna, it has been way too long since I've had you on the podcast. For those of you who don't know, Brenna is the sports director at KREM in Spokane, Gonzaga alum. Brenna, thank you for taking the time to come on the show.
Yeah, thank you. This is Tuesday, so as we're recording this on a Tuesday, so as I said to you before we started recording here, my life ends effectively tomorrow for the next month. So I'm glad we were able to sneak this in before the world gets crazy. State tournaments start tomorrow, so it's going to be a crazy time here.
No, I'm glad we snuck it into. I was looking at the schedule and I had such a routine every week for the entire WCC season of like, this is what show on Monday looks like. This is what Tuesday's show looks like. And then I was looking at the calendar and I was like, I need to find some stuff to do this week before Gonzaga plays again, because it's going to be a couple days. So this turned out perfect. I figured I would have to catch you early in the week if I was going to catch you at all. And I'm glad we found a way to make it work.
Absolutely.
All right. So yeah, busy part of the year. Obviously more than just men's basketball and women's basketball for the college side. I know you got a lot of other stuff going on in the inland Northwest, but one of the things I was noticing when I was kind of looking at a lot of the brackets is that there's going to be, it looks like, between 1 or potentially 4 different teams from the inland Northwest making the NCAA tournament this year. We got obviously Gonzaga's men's team, which is the only lock for the NCAA tournament, but we got 2 teams at Washington State that seem like they have at least a chance to make the tournament. Of course, Gonzaga women's team, who we'll talk about a little bit later in the show, who have a chance as well. How's that grind been for you, kind of covering college basketball this year with a lot of teams kind of right in that mix?
Well, unfortunately, WSU has kind of played their way out of it.
Yeah.
I don't see a world in which they make it unless they win their tournament, which would be a huge upset. That would be an Oregon State level of upset last year.
Run.
So now we're down to 3, which actually last year we had 4 teams in the NCAA tournament, which was craziness because the Eastern men also made it.
Right.
So 3 is just like easy peasy. And the Gonzaga women most likely are going to end up playing on that Tuesday if they make it as one of those the first 4.
Yeah.
So we'll see how it goes from there. But this region is never one where there's just one team that goes. We at least have 2 consistently now.
It keeps things interesting, I suppose, at least. You mentioned before we started recording that you were heading to Vegas in a couple of days. How are you feeling about that? Are you excited for the conference tournament? I feel like it's at least on the men's side, that's a pretty exciting conference tournament this year. More intrigue, at least, probably not at the very top, but at least more intrigue in the middle than I can remember there being in this tournament in a really long time, if ever.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. I'm excited to kind of keep tabs on Saturday and see what happens and who, it seems like, well, maybe not. Maybe who Gonzaga is playing isn't exactly what locked up. We'll see what happens. Yeah. That's going to be really interesting because normally it's one of those things where you're like, okay, I know who's going to win this matchup on Saturday, but this time around it's not as clear. So that's going to be really interesting to watch. And I'm excited to, peep my head out after the Gonzaga game and see what's going on with that second semifinal. That's going to be a good time to kind of, because we Gonzaga plays at 6, and then the second semifinal, I believe, is at 8. So, we were able to kind of, sneak our head out and see what's going on towards the end of that second game. So, that'll be a lot of fun to kind of take in and see how that goes.
Yeah, I'm probably going to record right after the game on Monday, but I feel like I'm going to need to find a way to get a second monitor in my office just so I can keep my eyes on that second game as it's going on, just to get a better sense of how things are going, because it's hard to remember the last time that there was multiple teams Gonzaga could end up playing in the championship. In past years, there's always a chance that it wouldn't be St. Mary's or BYU, but it was never a super reasonable chance. And this year, it wouldn't stun me. I have to look at how the bracket's laid out, but it wouldn't stun me if it was somebody else. If Santa Clara or San Francisco or somebody kind of snuck in there. There's just been so many talented teams and so many teams that are kind of good enough to make a run, even though they maybe they're not in the top 3 in the standings. And it makes it a lot more fun in my mind, a little bit more stressful for people who are in the media world, but a little bit more fun as well.
Yeah. And some people, the WC, for whatever reason, this year of all years, the WCC bracket really caught fire on Twitter the other day. Yeah. And, maybe we'll thank the Sickos Committee for college basketball, because they were redoing everyone's brackets like the WCC Tournament. I think that may have played a role. But this tournament's a really interesting one. It's really different in how it's constructed compared to almost every other conference tournament, which a lot of time lends itself to going chalk, but this year it might not. So we'll see how it goes.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because I thought it was funny too, and I think so many of the people, and we know that the general population has issues with Gonzaga that are often not founded in reality. I guess that's the politest way we'll put that. But for people who scream and yell a lot about how Gonzaga plays Pacific and Pepperdine, now all of a sudden they want Gonzaga to play Pacific and Pepperdine. It's just confusing. I don't understand what they're mad about.
Yeah, it's really, I don't know. I was like, this has been going on for 5 years, guys. Welcome to the party. This bracket's been set up like this forever. And I mean, there was a lot of reasons why it got set up like this. Mostly because Mark Few was very unhappy with the 3-game setup, and he made that very clear. Yeah. And that was one of Gonzaga's tenets for staying in the WCC. So this, y'all could have complained about this a few years ago if you wanted to. At this point, it's not changing. I am interested to see what they do with that setup once BYU leaves after next season. But obviously we're a ways away from having to have that figured out right now.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Brenna, one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about, you were one of few people who got the opportunity to be in the Kennel last year. And kind of covering events during COVID without fans in the arena. And then now this year, obviously fans are back. There was certainly some, we don't need to get too far into the weeds, but some challenges with fans being back in the arena, specifically in the Kennel because of mask mandates and things like that. But I'm just curious, what was the atmosphere like for people who didn't get to go to games this year? And we know that the crowd noise is not always accurate listening to the games or watching the games on TV. I'm curious, did you feel like there was a lot more energy? Was it just nice to have fans back, or kind of what was the vibe like now that fans could finally be back in the arena?
First of all, I want to apologize if anybody heard my dryer buzzer go off. I'm a bad podcast guest. Apologies. Yeah, I think first of all, the Kennel this year was, in terms of the Kennel Club in particular, was much more lively than in years past. Yeah. I definitely felt a sense from the students that this experience was so much more appreciated than in years before. And by the way, I'm someone who stood up for the Kennel Club and said, hey, people who are expecting these kids to be at every single game, I'm sorry, school's harder at Gonzaga than when you went there. I hate to break that to you, but that's the number one reason why all these kids are there. And so a lot of times I didn't go to a bunch of the lower level games because I had other stuff I needed to get done. Sure. I needed to be locked up in the broadcasting studio until 4 a.m., okay? Right. Thanks, Dan Garrity. Yeah, call him out. So, it all worked out, though. Apparently that hard work actually paid off. But that's been really cool to see. Just the energy in the kennel, even for games that aren't that big of a deal, has definitely been more pronounced this year. And I think a lot of people this year are really savoring every moment because of what happened last year.
Yeah, I hope so. Like, I'm glad to hear that, because I can't imagine if I'd lost, even early in my collegiate career, I didn't go to every single game either. I don't think I went to every single game until my senior year. But I would have been crushed if I lost a full year's worth of games to go to. And obviously, when I was in college and when you were there, they weren't, undefeated. They weren't as good as last year's team was. That was, the best year the school has ever put together. So to not be able to go to those games would have been tragic. So I'm glad to hear that it feels like things are picking back up, and hopefully that momentum will carry beyond this season as well.
Definitely.
One thing that I really want to talk to you about as well, too, is the other big change in college sports outside of just fans being back in the arena, but of course the new NIL rules and how that has kind of impacted college basketball, students being able to profit off their name, image, and likeness. We just saw Julian Strother get a new deal as well, which is huge. I think he had a couple other ones, but this was a big announced one. Obviously, Drew Timmy's had a handful of them as well. I'm curious, just if, as somebody who interacts with the athletes, in press conferences and individually, if you've seen kind of a difference because of that, if it's something that comes up a lot in conversation, or just kind of your thoughts on how that has impacted the game this year.
It was funny at the beginning of the year, because, Gonzaga now has a water deal. And so, or like a drink deal. And so they had those drinks up on the podium for every press conference.
Sure. And
when Chet Holmgren first got up there, he took them off. And he hasn't done it since. And everyone was like, is this like a sign of like a deal with Gatorade coming? Like, I don't know. But obviously it didn't lead to anything. But that was kind of like a moment where you're like, okay, that's different. I actually wasn't there for that. Somebody told me about it. But there isn't a lot of differences in terms of like when we're interacting with them after games or anything like that. I mean, that stuff just doesn't really come up in those settings. What is really different for us is that, if they have one of these NIL events, we don't necessarily need to go through Gonzaga Athletics to go talk to these kids.
Oh, there you go.
So that's something that's really different from my end. So like a lot of people saw that soundbite with Drew Timmy saying, I can swear on this podcast, right?
Yes.
Yes. All right. Drew Timmy saying shit happens after the St. Mary's game. So, like we saw, that was from an NIL event at Northern Quest.
Yeah.
And so that is a situation where, we wouldn't have been able to talk to those athletes normally during that time, but because they had that NIL event, we were able to talk to him and Julian Strother and Cierra Walker. So that's something that's a little bit different. And is honestly like really nice, especially since, we're still not back to 100% normal in terms of media access at Gonzaga, because it used to be that you could go into the locker room after games. And so anyways, they haven't let us do that yet, understandably, with, Omicron and everything like that. So, anyways, that's just kind of another opportunity that we're able to talk to them, because right now we only get to talk to two players after every game.
Right. Yeah.
So, and that's something that's so different than what we're used to. So, that's kind of nice. Like I was able, back in November, Drew Timmy did a Boost Bowl event. And so I was able to go to that and do a story on that, which was pretty cool. And that's something that we would have never seen before, obviously. So, and like, the people that went and met him were so excited to meet him. And I just thought that was really, really cool. So that is one thing that, in terms of my perspective, that's a little bit different, is that, like, we got to, like, Nolan Hickman last night had an event. And so we went to that and talked to him about his charity and stuff like that. And, that stuff may come up in the locker room, but since we don't have that right now, this is really our only avenue.
Absolutely. No, that's great. I want to talk more about this men's basketball team. We're going to talk about Nolan Hickman and Chet Holmgren a little bit in the second segment. Before we do that, though, I want to tell you all about Built Bar. This is the time of year that I've pretty much given up on all of my New Year's resolutions, but not this year. I'm sticking to my resolution to eat right thanks to Built Bar. It almost feels like it's not really a resolution because I actually enjoy eating them. Have you tried the Puffs? If you haven't, you're missing out on one of Built Bar's best tasting bars. Puffs are the first ever protein-infused marshmallow. They're fluffy, they're marshmallowy, they're not just a protein bar, they're a treat. And they're covered in 100% real chocolate. In fact, all Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate. A typical candy bar can be anywhere from 200 to 300 calories. Most Built Bars contain 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. They have mint brownie coconut and coconut almond, and new for this month, white chocolate cookies and cream. They are all delicious, and new flavors are coming out all the time. Go to Built.com and use promo code LOCKED15, and you'll get 15% off your order. That's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. All right, segment 2, still Andy Patton with Locked On Zags. Thank you again to those of you who have made Locked On Zags your first listen of the day. Make sure to check out the Locked On Bracket Breakdown on March 14th, right here on the Locked On Zags podcast feed and YouTube channel. College basketball expert Chris Gordy and myself and betting expert Lee Sterling are all going to be here to give in-depth breakdowns on every matchup for the NCAA tournament. All right, Brenna, I'm excited to get into talking about this men's basketball team. Obviously, a phenomenal season. The main thing that I wanted to talk about is kind of this conversation that I've seen creep up a lot, not just nationally, but amongst Gonzaga fans as well, kind of comparing last year's team to this year's team. Obviously, at this point last year, Gonzaga did not have any losses. This year's team has 3 losses. That's a pretty notable difference. But I'm curious kind of your thoughts, just having seen a lot of both of these teams, kind of the differences and similarities between these two teams as we head in March.
It's really interesting because the first thing that sticks out to me is just personality-wise, they're a little bit different.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that just sticks out to me the most because we get to talk to them after every game. This team is definitely more understated than last year's team in terms of their personality. They're a little bit more like smooth operators.
Yeah.
Last year's team was a little bit more like, I don't know. There was just a little bit. I don't want to say that there's not joy on this year's team because I don't think that at all. But I think the joy was just a little bit more pronounced, whereas this year's team is more like, yeah, we got this. We got this. You know what I mean? And they just kind of flow. So that's something that kind of sticks out to me. Obviously you still have like Drew Timme and Julian Strother, but everybody else is more of a smooth guy, which, like I said, is not a bad thing. I think it's more of like a cool and calm under pressure sort of thing. I was listening to your podcast today, so on Tuesday, and obviously defensively this team is light years better. And that is because of our friend Chet Holmgren. And not 100%, but a lot of it is because of him. Let's be real. That's something. A little bit more depth in the front court this year than last year, probably. I will say something that is starting to concern me is I'm feeling like the bench is becoming similar to last year's bench. And that is something I have been vocal about and I do not like. So that we'll probably get more into that at some point, but that is something that concerns me.
Yeah, I mean, I might as well start there because that's for me, like after Saturday's game, I was going through Mailbag Monday and I was kind of, I try to stay relatively positive and I'm not a doomsday person, and certainly a loss to a very good St. Mary's team on senior night on the road is far from the worst thing. And I hope most Gonzaga fans understand that. But if I was going to pinpoint something that I'm legitimately concerned about heading into March, it would be the bench. And it's pretty glaringly obvious why. I believe that in the last 3 games, the bench has scored 10 points, and 7 of them were from Hunter Salas against San Francisco. So that's not good. There's no other way to look at it. Anton Watson has not played well the last few games. Nolan Hickman has struggled significantly the last few games as well. And I know that Mark Few talked a lot early in the year about how young and how inexperienced this team was, and that kind of helped explain some of their struggles early in the year. Particularly the Alabama game and the Tarleton State game, obviously the two of Gonzaga's biggest challenges. But now, we should be past that stuff. And I think, some of it is probably just fatigue, particularly for the freshmen. I can't imagine going a high school season to this kind of season is a lot. And while Chet Holmgren has seemed to adjust pretty well, it's a bit more understandable that some of the other freshmen might be struggling with that a little bit. But at the end of the day, if this team's depth doesn't step up in March, there's going to be some problems. And that's something that I'm legitimately worried about. You have obviously got an opportunity to chat with Hunter Salas and Nolan Hickman. And obviously we know Nolan is a phenomenal kid with his charity and everything like that. I'm curious. We're going to talk about Chet Holmgren in a minute because he's obviously such an exciting player, but I'm curious your perspective on these two other freshmen who sometimes kind of get pushed aside a little bit, but are going to be really key pieces for this team when the tournament rolls around.
First of all, just to address the Anton piece, I think he's going to figure it out. He's old enough at this point. He's going to figure it out. So I'm not super concerned about that. Before the Baylor game last year, I was having lunch with someone before the game, and I was like, I don't think they're going to win tonight. And the reason why I said I didn't think they were going to win is because they basically didn't have a bench against UCLA. Yeah. They really didn't have that much of a bench the entire tournament. And I was like, they just poured all their effort into this UCLA game. Yeah. And how in the world are they going to come out and keep up with Baylor? I don't know. I'm a little concerned. And I think I should have been a lot of concerned, apparently. Yeah. So, that's where my biggest issues come in is it's like, look, this works for now, but it doesn't work once you get to the hard part of March. Yeah. You can get through the first probably 3 games and be okay with that, but that's not going to work. Yeah. If you get to a Final Four, you need to have contributions from people on the bench. And I will say Hunter seems to be figuring it out a little bit more right now. It's not like he's contributing a ton, but when he's out there, I don't feel like he's a liability. No. I don't feel like Nolan's really a liability either. I just feel like he hasn't been shining in the way that we're used to seeing him shine. And I hope that he, I'm really hopeful that, one of the things that this WCC season does provide is a break. They get a break this week, and then they get a nice break the next week. So I'm hoping that kind of helps these guys get their legs underneath them a little bit more, restore their confidence a little bit, and they're able to use those games in Vegas to help them out. So I will say that is one of the nice things about how the WCC plays their season is that I think this is a really good opportunity for them to get better and not have to worry about playing somebody else or doing a game plan or anything like that. All they have to worry about is getting better themselves. So I really hope it happens because we cannot have the 6-man rotation that this team had last year. It's not tenable. It's not going to work.
Absolutely. So, I think there's been some criticism of the coaching staff for how they have really ridden the starters significantly. This was a big part of last year's team, obviously. And I don't know that we can pinpoint, Corey Kispert's struggles throughout a large chunk of the tournament and Drew Timmy's struggles specifically against Baylor to fatigue necessarily. I don't think that is a full picture of what happened, but it's entirely possible it's part of it. You look at the minutes that those guys played last year. It was staggering how many minutes they were playing. And this year that has been better for the most part. I think Mark Few has been more willing to play, to bring in guys earlier in blowout games in particular, and also to not ride the starters as much in the closer games. But we saw these last 3 WCC games were all fairly close ones. And Hunter Salas was playing less than 10 minutes per game. Nolan Hickman was playing barely 10 minutes per game. And it's just, I don't know if you can say that it's a coaching issue if they need to play these guys in order to win the games. Like you obviously need to win, focus on the game in front of you. But I do wonder if there is some potential to try to figure out a way to get these guys some more action during the season so that they're a bit more prepared when they have to come into games, final 4 games in March. Because if we don't have a bench for these last couple of games of the season, it could have a similar result to last year. I hope not, but it's hard not to think that a similar result could happen.
I also think that losing Kaden was a bigger deal than a lot of people realize.
Yeah.
They kind of had a 9-man rotation with him.
Mm-hmm.
And he was really starting to make some progress and make a dent. And I think he would have really, I think he would have only gotten better as the season would have progressed. So that's just, I'm sad about that because it was fun watching him play. So that's another thing that, we can this bench. And I mean, who knows what's going to happen with Dominic Harris. I'm not sure if the staff is going to be willing to bring him back for, however many games he's ready to play for. But, I just think, I think the bench is pretty much set where it is right now. So therefore they've got to make sure that those kids figure out whatever is going on.
Yeah, well, and that leaves them with a 3-man rotation up front, unless they're willing to play Ben Gregg in those moments. And Ben Gregg has developed throughout the year, but he still struggles defensively to the point where I'm not sure you'd want to put him in against some of the bigs that they're going to play toward the end of the tournament. But I wish we could have seen some more opportunities with lineups that included Julian Strather playing the 4. Something that obviously Corey spent almost all of his time at the 4 last year. So it's not like they're unwilling to play players like that at that position. But now if they were to try to do it now, maybe it would work because the other team would not be expecting it at all. Maybe they've been working on it behind the scenes. I don't know, but it strikes me as something that I can't remember the last time Mark Few made that dramatic of a change in the NCAA tournament. So I'm kind of guessing it's not going to happen, which puts a lot more pressure on Watson. Which like you said, I think he's up to the task to step up and contribute more than he has the last few games. But that's it's a lot of stuff on his shoulders right now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's a junior. He's got to figure it out.
Yeah, so it's time to shine.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, so Brenna, I want to talk about Chet Holmgren because who doesn't want to talk about Chet Holmgren, number 1 recruit, potential number 1 pick in the draft, extraordinarily exciting athlete. You have shared a story that I've seen a handful of other times shared about how Chet likes to share the wealth with his post-game or halftime interviews. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what he likes to do in those instances, because I think it says a lot about who he is as a person.
Yeah, so I got this because I was listening to another podcast, so that's how I kind of learned that this happened the first time, and then I saw it happen a second time. So the Sideline Pass podcast, I believe that's what it's called, with Molly McGrath and Chris Budden. Obviously, Molly's been on a lot of games this year, and so the last 2 times that Molly has interviewed Chet, he has brought another player along with him. So the first time it was Julian, the second time was Rozier Bolton. He's just kind of trying to share the wealth in that moment and not just have it be him that's with the sideline reporter. So he is that's kind of what he's trying to do. I'll be interested to see if he keeps trying to pull that off during the tournament. It'll be fascinating to watch.
I think for me, one of the questions that I've been posed, and I'm sure that other people, who cover this team have been talked about is, now that Gonzaga has had these top tier recruits, 5-star guys, like, are they going to continue to kind of dive into more 5-star caliber high schoolers, obvious one and done candidate players? And for me, I don't want to say that the answer is no, but I think it's very clear that Mark Few is still not going to recruit players who aren't very, very team oriented. And there are plenty of 5-star caliber players out there who are team oriented. There are 3 of them on this current roster. Nolan Hickman and Hunter Salas would not be in the roles they were in if they weren't the kind of players who are willing to accept those kinds of roles. Chet Holmgren obviously is like that as well. So was Suggs last season. So I feel like the fact that they can now bring in those caliber of players, like Hunter Salas is such a talented kid to be the 4th guard on this team. So I don't think that the answer to that question is, they're just going to start bringing in every single 5-star that they can get, and they're going to have like a Kentucky roster where all 5 dudes go to the NBA that next season. I doubt that's going to happen, but it's strikes me as so powerful that the staff can still be so intentional about finding guys who fit that mold and who are willing, not a lot of first overall guys like Chet would be willing to be, for large chunks of the season, the second best big man on your team. Like that is a wild thing to be willing to accept, to score 2 points against Texas in your second career game, but only care that we won. That's what matters. And I think that's such a cool thing about him, about Jalen last year, about Hunter and Nolan, and about just the staff in general and how they kind of value that so tremendously when looking for talented kids.
Yeah. I mean, that's, they're picky. They're
yes.
picky. Which, I know a lot of people are concerned about this year's recruiting class, and that makes total sense, but I'm sure that's part of it. I'm sure that there was some pickiness going on there, and they just decided, I forget who it was, but there was a kid who had them in like his top 5 or something like that. And then it was like, we're not recruiting that kid. Like, so yeah, that's, it's been really, that's one of the things I think that Few is really trying hard to be a stickler on is making sure that the culture of the program doesn't get away with him as they continue to level up in recruiting.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Brenna, we're going to come back in the third segment. We're going to talk about the women's team, their path through the WCC tournament, and what that could look like, and of course, their path to the NCAA tournament as well. Before we get there, though, let's talk about today's sponsor, Run Your Pool. March Madness is only 2 weeks away. That means you need to start thinking now about where you're going to be running your brackets this year. Are you going for the usual, or are you going for the best? We've done our homework here at Locked On, and we're running brackets with runyourpool.com. Along with standard brackets, Run Your Pool offers game types like Survivor or Pick X. They have options to edit scoring, and they offer more intel to make your picks, all stuff you won't find at ESPN or CBS. If you've got a business, Run Your Pool can help you take some of that madness magic and play alongside your employees or even gain customers. Plus, they offer full customer support, custom branding, and one of the easiest 3-minute setups you'll ever find. Clearly, we believe in Run Your Pool because, like I said, we're running our brackets there ourselves. There's no truer test than that. If you want to play against us for a shot at a cash prize, join us at runyourpool.com/lockedon. And while you're there, create your own pool for your friends and family. Enter Pure Madness at checkout for $10 off your custom pool. All the rules and details will be available there. That's runyourpool.com/lockedon for your chance to win a cash prize. We look forward to seeing you there. Today's episode is also brought to you by Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing number of makes and models, it is now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Why endure often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning, like is your Odyssey an LX or an EX, and wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, choosing the only brand their warehouse happens to carry? You have computers with access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket. Rock Auto is a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Plus, Rock Auto prices are reliably low for every customer, and they have everything you could need: brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil, and even new carpets. I just had my 13-year-old car serviced recently, and I can tell you having one place to find all the parts I need makes things infinitely easier. So go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Write Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. That's rockauto.com. All right, segment 3, still Andy Patton, still joined today by KREM's Brenna Greene. Brenna, I want to talk about the Gonzaga women's basketball team. The women's team, according to the latest bracketology at ESPN, is right there among the last 4 teams set to make the tournament. They're right on the edge. We are obviously hoping that they make things a lot easier by winning the WCC tournament, defeating BYU, something that has escaped them so far this season. Do you think that that's what they need to do to get a spot in the tournament, or is there a chance that they can still make it even if they don't win the tournament outright?
I don't think they're going to win the tournament outright. I hope I'm wrong. Play this in eternity if I'm wrong. I will happily hear my voice say that. I mean, the first thing you have to remember about BYU is that all their girls, they weren't supposed to have this many returners this year, but they all came back because of their extra COVID year. So this is a team that Gonzaga even was not supposed to be playing whatsoever. Meanwhile, nobody came. I guess Cierra Walker came back for her extra COVID year, and I guess you could say Abby O'Connor came back too. So, yeah, I mean, you lose the Work Twins, you lose Jill Townsend. I don't think though that these projections have Gonzaga in only if they beat BYU, because that just wouldn't make a lot of sense with how these two games have gone so far, for them to be like, well, they're in if they beat BYU, because they haven't been as close as what they should be. Or not, I shouldn't say what they should be. They just haven't been that close. I mean, the first BYU game, Gonzaga came out and then just, it was weird. It was like, whoa, what happened to the team for the first half? And then obviously the second game, they barely scored any points between the second and third quarters. So yeah, I think that they're fine if they lose to BYU. I do. They just can't lose to a team like a Portland, like they did a few years ago. That cannot happen.
Yeah. Tremendous credit to Coach Fortier and obviously in the staff. I mean, we're talking about a team that lost, like you said, the Worth Twins. So much talent from last year's roster is gone, and they still come out. They go 24-6 this year, 0-4 against ranked teams, which hurts. Obviously, you want to be able to find a way to beat some of those top tier programs, but still, obviously, 24-2 in the rest of the games that they have played. Really tremendous accomplishment for this team. It feels kind of like this team is in a spot somewhat similar to like earlier teams in Mark Few's tenure, where as a mid-major program, they obviously have respect and are considered, obviously they have a chance to get an at-large bid from the WCC, which is obviously a challenging accomplishment. It's something that a lot of men's teams have been striving for a long time, and I don't think has happened all of that often on the women's side as well. But it feels like they have to be really close to perfect. And I don't know if you see something like that changing, if there is more movement for more mid-major programs to get some kind of respect and success on the women's side as well, or if it's kind of a sport similar to the men's side where it's just dominated up at the top.
Yeah, that's just what it is at the women's level. It's just point blank what it is. It's even more dominated by Power 5 teams than the men's side is. Thankfully for Gonzaga, they have been in the tournament enough where they have that Gonzaga name attached to them and that clout, and it certainly doesn't hurt them in this situation. So that's nice for them. But the women's game still just has it's not as much like the men's game where there can be a Cinderella. Now there have been,
sure, but
it's not as commonplace in the women's tournament as it is in the men's, and I think that probably demonstrates what I'm trying to say.
I would like to see that change. I mean, obviously, for a long time, UConn was just the 12 best recruits every year basically went to UConn. Like, it was not quite that extreme, but pretty close to that extreme for a while. It has seemed to spread out a little bit since then, but certainly not at the level that we've seen. Obviously we talk about multiple 11 seeds making deep runs on the men's side for, seemingly every single year. Oregon State making a deep run last year. It would be nice to see that happen on the women's side. Hopefully those are the things that are maybe starting to shift a little bit on that side. Obviously Gonzaga is not a Cinderella as much as they have been in the past. They've made multiple runs in the NCAA tournament in the last couple of years, a lot of really talented players. I'm curious what your thoughts on this year's team for people who maybe haven't tuned in all that much to this year's team, who are hopefully going to watch them in the WCC tournament. Maybe if you can give a little primer on some of the key players to be watching for this year and kind of who helps make this team win basketball games.
She's not going to start, but my favorite player is Yvonne Ejim, and it's not even close. I love watching her play basketball. It is a revelation. It is so much fun. I would be absolutely stunned if she doesn't win WCC Sixth Player of the Year. She has been dominant. She's played more off the bench than the person she comes in for, who's starting. So that gives you kind of a primer on her. She's a lot of fun, and she's going to be a star next year for this team. Melody Kempton, obviously that's kind of their leader. She is a Post Falls native, and she had that buzzer beater to beat San Francisco down in San Francisco. So I've been here for like almost her whole career, so it's been fun to watch her progress and watch her gain confidence, because when you first watched her, it was a little like it's just things just weren't quite balancing right, it felt like. And now she definitely has that stride. Let's see, obviously Cierra Walker is their sharpshooter. She is, she had 8 threes this past weekend, so definitely somebody who can go off if she wants to. And then obviously you have the Truong Twins as well. And I'm trying to think, Abby's their other starter, I believe. Abby O'Connor, who played a little bit last year, but has obviously played more this year. That Abby's their other starter. Sorry if she isn't. I think I'm right there, but I don't know. Sorry.
I think so. That sounds
right. So those are kind of your key players to watch. But Yvonne's my favorite to watch. Just I got a soft spot for watching her play the game of basketball.
Yeah, no, the first game that I watched was one of the Stanford games, and she immediately caught my eye. She's really, really fun to watch. Brenna, last thing I want to talk to you about before I let you go, Coach Fortier, we kind of touched on her a little bit earlier, just won her 200th game as Gonzaga's coach, a pretty nice accomplishment for her. I can't imagine how fortunate this program is to, obviously to lose a coach like Kelly Graves, who was an icon, an institution, had done such good work with this program, helped develop, obviously superstars like Courtney Vandersloot. But then the Zags just kind of keep cruising along with bringing in Lisa Fortier. And it seems like she's just had such an incredible positive impact on this program since taking over.
Yeah. There's been a lot of continuity in this program. Lisa obviously came from Kelly's staff. Yeah. So it's been a really smooth transition for this program. They, haven't. I think the last time they missed the tournament was like 2016, 2017 area. So it's been a while. And before that, they hadn't missed the tournament in a few years either. So, this is a program that is established, that is definitely one of the top programs on the West Coast. Yeah. And, their next big thing is they have got to get to a second weekend in a tournament. Yeah. That is what it's not going to happen this year. But that is something that needs to happen for this program. Unfortunately, obviously last year was a bit of a letdown. I don't count 2019 because they lost Laura Stockton and Jill Townsend at the same game. So I can't hold that season against them. Just what an awful situation that was. One of the worst games I've ever attended. It was carnage out there on the court. And 2 very intense injuries. It wasn't like, oh, I sprained an ankle. It was like, oh no, I broke my leg and I tore my ACL. Yeah. And then obviously 2020, they had a solid team that year as well. And then the tournament doesn't go their way. So, they don't have the tournament. I shouldn't say doesn't go their way. They don't have the tournament. So, that's the next thing. They've done it once before under Fortier. But they really, that season, they should have gone to an Elite Eight. They should have beat Tennessee in the Sweet 16 that year. That was 2015, I think. So, they should have won. So, that's the next. They need to get to a second weekend in a tournament again, and then that's if I were in that program, that would be my big goal right now.
Yeah. Well, lots of Gonzaga basketball to watch this week, later this week, and then obviously early next week when the men's team plays there are a couple of games in Vegas. Brenna, I know you're going to be there. I know you're going to be covering it. Do you want to let people know where they can find you on social media, where they can find your work and everything that you're doing right now? Because I know you're in a pretty busy time of the year.
Yeah, at Brenna Greene _ on both Instagram and Twitter. I might get real wild and try to set up TikTok during this tournament run. We'll see though. I'm not. I've pondered it. I don't know. I don't know if I'm willing to make that sort of commitment right now. But I don't know. We'll see what happens.
Not quite the big reveal of Brenna Greene starting a TikTok account. Not quite committing to it yet, but it has been spoken out into the lithosphere. So
maybe
see.
I'm saying this to put pressure on myself to do it. So.
Now you at least know where you announced it if it does become something you end up doing.
Yeah, totally.
All right, Brenna, thank you so much for coming on the show. We got a lot more really fun stuff coming out this week. A couple more guests coming on the show before we get into the games next week. Right here on the Locked On Zags podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts. Also on Twitter at Locked On Zags. You can find me on Twitter at ScoreZagsScore. I want to thank all of you again for making Locked On Zags your first listen of the day. Now you can make your second listen of the day the Locked On NFL Draft podcast. Ryan Tracy and former NFL cornerback Eric Crocker bring the NFL Draft to life every day with insight and analysis on college football prospects and NFL front offices. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. All right, thank you all for listening, and go Zags.